What freedom do you have if you have all of your money in a bank that can freeze it? What freedom do you have if you have your money embedded in a currency where someone can print 4x more of it without your approval and debase it to zero? What freedom do you have if you own real estate in a city where the mayor can put rent control on it or expropriate it, or the governor can tax it away from your family? When you're the little guy, when you're struggling for freedom and struggling in the face of overwhelming power, you need some advantage. Bitcoin offered us the way out. If you want freedom, if you want liberty, if you want to live your finest life, you're going to need economic power. The US could own 20% of the network like that for free. The dollar would strengthen, the nation would be enriched. And the real promise is if you own 4 to 6 million Bitcoin, you're going to pay off the entire national debt. And then all of our enemies will end up having to buy into the network once it passes 10 or 20 million a coin, and they will enrich us.
你满意自己的薪水吗？求职网最新调查显示，台湾超过90%上班族不满意薪资，因为通膨压力大，加班文化严重。更惨的是，超过60%上班族高达3年以上没加薪。那自己主动要求加薪呢？成功几率还不到一半。那我们该怎么办？这条大路通罗马，既然上班这条路不通，那就换别条路吧，说不定会更好。这就是全球最大的比特币企业持有者 Michael Saylor 成功的关键。2020年，当美国疯狂印钞 ，Michael 经营的公司陷入倒闭危机。就在这时，他勇敢选择投资比特币，结果如何呢？5年后，公司成长210倍 ，Michael 也成为当代金融科技最具影响力的人物。2月份甚至受邀到 CPEC 会议演讲。CPEC 会议是美国历史最悠久、规模最大的保守派政治活动。演讲的嘉宾非富即贵，包含美国总统川普、英国前首相特拉斯、全球首富马斯克。而且不只邀请 Michael， 他的演讲还排在美国副总统 JD Vance 之后，可见加密货币在全球的重要性越来越高。那 Michael 这次在 CPEC 说了什么？美国真的会将比特币列为战略储备吗？为什么上班族想要财富自由一定要有比特币呢？所有精华的内容都浓缩在这部影片。如果你不想一辈子被薪资困住，那现在就是你翻转人生的关键。嗨，我是 Emma， 带你在币圈趋势中打造属于自己的被动收入。在我们开始前，可以请你帮个忙吗？YouTube 后台显示有 60% 的观众还没订阅频道。如果你喜欢我们的影片，免费支持我们的方式就是点下订阅按钮。每周日都能收到币圈最新的消息，更不会错过任何的财富密码哟。谢谢。
Satoshi, many years ago, had this vision for sound money and sovereign money via technology, via modern cryptography, modern semiconductors, the modern internet. And that idea of giving economic power to the individual in the face of the overwhelming power of the collective, when you feel like the government's against you, the banking system against you, the currency is against you, big tech is against you, when you're the little guy, when you're struggling for freedom and struggling in the face of overwhelming power, you need some advantage. And Satoshi created this network that's based on 2 principles. One principle is integrity, and the other principle is sovereignty. The integrity, we all know, is there'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoin, and that's enforced by millions and millions of computers and hundreds of millions of people everywhere in the world that believe it's not okay to lie, cheat, or steal. It's not okay to distort the truth. There is a truth. There is a universal common ledger that no one can tamper with, no one can corrupt. Not a nation state, not a company, not a politician. And that idea of a censorship-resistant, unstoppable version of the truth was a first in human history.
It was a first.
And then the second idea is sovereignty. It's like, well, if there is a truth, can you own it? Right? So with Bitcoin, the idea is you can own a Bitcoin and you don't have to trust a bank with it. You don't have to trust the city with it. You don't have to leave it in the custody of a big company. You can take self-custody. So we oftentimes say, what do you own? The only thing you own are your memories. Everything else in this world that you own at the pleasure of someone more powerful than you, and they can take it away from you via force. What they can't take away from you is your experience and what's in your head. And the brilliance of Satoshi was, what if we could put all of the money in the world into the heads of the people? What if what you knew was the password to unlock all of your wealth or protect it, and nobody else could take it away from you? And that's a profound shift, because what Satoshi did was gave us a network where hundreds of millions of people can own and control their economic energy in a censorship-resistant, unstoppable fashion. And that was an idea worth nothing for a year, and then it became worth $1 million, and then it became worth $1 billion, and then it became worth $10 billion, and then it became worth $100 billion. And when MicroStrategy, now Strategy, got in the business about 4 years ago, it was worth $150 billion. And today it's worth $2 trillion.
And at that time, you were a software company, and you saw this as an opportunity, a different opportunity.
We were a software company, and we were staring at a quick death or slow death or take a risk. And, you know, when the COVID lockdowns took place and the interest rates went to zero, we had to decide, were we going to sell the company, throw in the towel, or could we find a way out? And this is the challenge that 40 million companies in America have, which is, if you're not one of the Magnificent Seven, if you're not Apple or Google or Microsoft, how are you supposed to compete in a world where trillion-dollar companies have all the power, big banks have all the power, big government has the power? And Bitcoin offered us the way out, because if you recapitalize a company on Bitcoin, you're not slave to the bank, you're not slave to the currency, you're not slave to the local politician that tells you what you can do and how you can use your money. Instead of having the central bank take interest rates to zero and keep them there forever, right? Bitcoin gave us a 60% return every year, because the Bitcoin interest rate is set by a global decentralized system of capital flows. So my company was able to save itself when we switched from Bitcoin, from the US Treasury or the bond to Bitcoin. Our market cap increased from $1 billion to $100 billion. And our enterprise value increased from $600 million to $105 billion. And we went from a $500 million company growing 0% a year, competing against a monopoly, Microsoft, where it's hopeless, to a $50 billion company growing 60% a year that's part of the digital economy. So I feel blessed, and we are very fortunate, but that really motivated me with a mission. And what I realized is Satoshi gave us a way out of our conundrum. Satoshi gave us a strategy that makes a small company big and powerful, that makes the individual more powerful than the state, that turns the power balance between the collective and the individual on its head. And the secret to that is this powerful worldwide network that puts the individual first, that's uncorruptible, that anybody can join, that gives you unfettered, uncensored property rights.
你是什么时候第一次听说比特币呢？我是在2013年第一次听到比特币，当时价格才$100。可是我每天在4大会计师事务所忙着加班，就没再多研究。等到2021年再注意到时，价格已经上涨到3万美元，成长300倍，也太惊人。上班族就算努力工作10年，薪水也很难上涨3倍。没想到比特币涨这么多。
If you think about the world today, there's just an inherent force. There's a struggle between capitalism and socialism, between people that believe in freedom and free markets and those that believe in central planning and collectivism. And if I'm a socialist, I want to take away your guns and your money. And Bitcoin is money that they can't take away. Like, what freedom do you have if you have all of your money in a bank that can freeze it? What freedom do you have if you have your money embedded in a currency where someone can print 4x more of it without your approval and debase it to zero? What freedom do you have if you own real estate in a city where the mayor can put rent control on it or expropriate it, or the governor can tax it away from your family? What freedom do you have if all your wealth is in a business where the government can tell you you can't operate, shut down your pipeline, tax your employees, tax your income, regulate your product? And the answer is you only have conditional freedom until the government changes and they just take away that freedom. And then when they take away your wealth, when they take away your economic power, they're going to starve you to death. And then you've got nothing. So Bitcoin represents putting your economic wealth in cyberspace. It's beyond the reach of the mayor, beyond the reach of the governor, beyond the reach of any nation state, beyond the reach of any other company that would do you harm. It is the first time in the history of the human race that you can bind economic energy tightly to an individual, to a family, to your company, and you don't have to ask permission to have economic wealth, to have money, and you don't have to live in fear that someone gets up on a morning and just takes it all away from you to power you down. And so if I am conservative, I want a family, I want a company, I want freedom. Well, how are you going to pay for it? And if you live in a country like Venezuela and the currency goes to zero, you're going to be begging for food next week. Wouldn't it be great if I could take the wealth of my family and put it into a network that no one can loot, no one can corrupt, and at the end of the day, I don't want to gamble my future. I don't want to take my life savings and gamble in the stock market. I don't want to take my life savings and gamble that the mayor of the city won't just take my property away from me. I actually just want to own the wealth. I want to own my money. And Bitcoin is a way for you to convert your capital into digital capital that will last 1,000 years. Your country will be, your company, your country, or your family will be wealthy for generations to follow. You don't have to live in fear. And when you don't have to live in fear, when you have economic independence, you can actually stretch your time horizon out and you can build an institution, you can build your family, you can build a life for yourself.
你真的有自由吗？老实说，我觉得上班族很难有真正的自由，因为最精华的时间和精力都已经被绑在一份看不到未来的工作上。即便升官加薪，收入还是有一个隐形的天花板。当收入是有限的，自由就是有限的，那我们该怎么办？透过投资币圈，重新拿回属于我们的自由。所以今天我想把最新写的这本书《自由》免费的送给你，分享过去10年我是如何从每天工作12小时的上班族，到现在开除老板，每天睡到自然醒。新手该如何投资币圈赚钱？分享安全又快速的3大步骤。 并且准备常见的50个币圈专有名词，再也不用担心听不懂。你可以在资讯栏的第一条链接中免费领取自由，只要按照书中的步骤投资，不用30天就能成为前10%投资赚钱的赢家。来自台湾、杜拜、香港等超过60位上班族们都已经达成了。下一位投资币圈赚钱的会是你吗？
This nation became great because of the Louisiana Purchase. We bought a third of the country from Napoleon for a few $1,000,000. Then we purchased Texas and California from the Mexicans for a few million more. Then we purchased Alaska from the Russians for a few million more. We didn't even know there'd be $1 trillion of mineral rights underneath Alaska when we purchased it. They called it Seward's Folly. But what I'm describing is manifest destiny. If you want to create a great nation, you have to build it on valuable property. You have to know, where is all the money headed? Where is the future? When we bought California, we didn't know there'd be a Hollywood. We didn't know there'd be a Silicon Valley. No one really considered. In 1867, we didn't have a petroleum industry. And so where is the money headed in the future? The money's headed to cyberspace. Bitcoin is property in cyberspace. The manifest destiny of this country is to own cyberspace. And I think that President Trump understands the value of owning scarce, desirable property. If we go to cyberspace and we buy Bitcoin and the nation embraces Bitcoin, then all of the capital in the world, all of the Chinese money, all the Russian money, all the European money, all of the money from the 20th century, the money invested in a Siberian warehouse, the money invested in fill in the blank, anything you could possibly own in Africa, all of that capital is flowing into cyberspace. It's going from physical to digital. It's flowing from the 20th century to the 21st century. The 21st century is going to be 1 billion AIs thinking 1 million times a second. And what are they going to be using to move their money around? They're going to use digital money because they can't get a bank account. They can't get a credit card. I have to approve my wire transfers from my bank once a week. It takes about 20 minutes, and they ask me on the phone whether the money should move.
It's a good problem. With 478,740 Bitcoin, Michael.
The computers...
We don't feel too bad, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get it. But my point we've been doing it that way for 50 years. And if you look at the way the digital economy is going to run in the 21st century, it's going to be 1 billion computers thinking 1 million times a second, moving assets at the speed of light. Bitcoin represents digital capital. That network is $2 trillion today. It's going to be $20 trillion in 4 to 8 years. It's going to be $200 trillion in 20 years. Then it's going to grow faster than every other asset in the world. It's going to continue to grow. The United States should own it, right?
你觉得比特币会成为21世纪最重要的资产吗？我认为当然会。所以不仅是美国、台湾、香港、新加坡和马来西亚等都应该拥有比特币。欢迎在底下留言分享你的看法。
Bitcoin it's the most powerful digital network in the world. It is cyber power. If you want to dominate the next 100 years, just like the last 100 years is based upon dominating sea power, fire power, air power, space power, nuclear power. You want to dominate cyberspace. You want cyber power. It's the unstoppable network that no one can corrupt. And the use of the unstoppable network, among other things, is hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital moving from point A to point B. But the other use of the network is I can send a message which is unstoppable, and I can store information that is unstoppable, and I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the authenticity of an instruction or a document. No country, no company, no individual not a trillion computers can corrupt that message. So if you want to own the future, you want to own cyberspace. How do you own cyberspace? You own Bitcoin, and then you run the Bitcoin networks. You mine Bitcoin, you own Bitcoin. President Trump understands property. He understands the value of Greenland. He understands the value of Alaska. He understands the value of oil rights. He understands drill, baby, drill would be impossible if we didn't own the land, right?
He understands American dominance.
And land is physical property. When I run electricity through semiconductors and I create a wall of encrypted energy, I create digital property. Bitcoin is digital property. You should own it. Your company should own it. Our nation should own it. It is the future.
那什么时候会发生？
I think there's an appreciation of the power of Bitcoin throughout the cabinet, throughout the House, throughout the Senate. There's going to be a political process by which we build consensus with the White House, the Senate, and the cabinet, and find the right way through. But, you know, what I would say on this topic is the U.S. could own 20% of the network like that for free. The dollar would strengthen, the nation would be enriched. And the real promise is if you own 4 to 6 million Bitcoin, you're going to pay off the entire national debt. You're going to neutralize it. We can generate a $50 trillion to $80 trillion benefit to the United States people, to the citizens, to the taxpayers, and we can do it simply by seeing the future. It cost $6 million to buy Alaska. The payoff was $1 trillion. Just like right now, you can literally buy it for a song and dance. That's the opportunity. The risk is that you wouldn't want the Saudis to buy it first, or the Russians or the Chinese or the Europeans. And there's only room for one nation state to buy up 20% of the network. And obviously, I think it should be the United States. I think it will be the United States. It's a way for us to enrich ourselves and emerge as a creditor nation in a matter of a decade. It's also a way for us to ensure that we're the economic leaders in cyberspace and the digital economy for the next 100 years. And if we do that, every one of our allies will follow us, and then all of our enemies will end up having to buy into the network once it passes 10 or 20 million a coin, and they will enrich us.
美国会建立以太币 Solana 战略储备吗？
I think the key thing to keep in mind right now is that Bitcoin is a commodity. It is an asset without an issuer. There is no company, no individual, no country, no entity that can corrupt it. It has reached escape velocity. It has gotten to the point where it is basically a freedom virus, a truth virus, a monetary virus. It has been embraced by $1 trillion of smart money. That is, $1 trillion of real money has been invested in the network. It is 99% of the digital power on Earth. It's fairly unstoppable. And so if you're going to capitalize a company or a country, you want to capitalize it on property or a commodity or a network which is beyond the point where anybody could change the nature of it. And so that makes Bitcoin the most certain thing in the digital universe. What I would say to everybody in this room is if you want freedom, if you want liberty, if you want to live your finest life, you're going to need economic power. You need physical power, you need political power, but you need economic power. Bitcoin represents economic armor. When you put on the suit of armor, then no mayor, no government, no collectivist, no socialist can debank you. They can't take your money away. They can't impoverish you. Just like a gun is a deterrent, Bitcoin is a deterrent, because if you have wealth in Bitcoin, you have the option to move it to any jurisdiction, and you can keep it, and no one can take it away from you via force of violence, no matter where you are on Earth. And so Satoshi gave us an opportunity. I hope I intrigue all of you with the opportunity and you go do the research and determine for yourself how you benefit from it. But I just leave you with the thought that Bitcoin is economic armor.
没错，说得太好了，比特币的确是一个强大的资产，但如果你听完今天的访谈就兴冲冲的跑去投资比特币，有一个残酷的现实是，你高几率会亏钱收场。为什么？因为并不是每个人都适合投资比特币。Michael 本来就是美国上市公司企业家，能接受比特币大起大落，但一般上班族已经习惯每个月固定有薪水入账，面对比特币的下跌，很容易担心害怕，一不小心就卖出。就像是比特币最近跌回2024年11月的价位8.8万。如果是买在10万以上的投资者，现在面临20%的下跌，比特币还会不会再跌20%？有可能啊，那还要等多久比特币才会上涨？不知道。难道在币圈就一定要面对这么高的波动吗？有没有不论比特币上涨或下跌时都能持续获利的方法呢？真的有。透过放贷，将资金借给交易员，每天就能赚到稳定的利息，报酬率高于股票和房地产，但风险远低于直接投资比特币交易合约。再也不用担心晚上睡觉时手机通知币价暴跌亏钱，而是每天早上起床时账户就自动多了一笔收入。最重要的是，再也不用看老板脸色就能帮自己加薪。去年我还受邀到香港分享币圈投资经历，希望能避免新手再犯下我过去的错误，不用走弯路就能在币圈投资赚钱，过上每天睡到自然醒的生活。所以我准备了一个45分钟的免费影片，分享自己是如何从什么都不懂的币圈韭菜，到现在成功打造一份稳定安心的被动收入。你可以在资讯栏的第一条链接中找到，不用天天盯盘，也能30天在币圈安心赚钱。我是 Emma， 还会继续分享关于币圈投资、被动收入的经验。记得按赞、订阅、开启旁边的小铃铛，并打开全部，还有 follow 我的 IG 哦，那你就不会错过这些知识了。我们下周见，拜拜。